Morning. My name is Doug Hager, and I am on the core group for the Imagine Appeal. I thought that if I could get through the first service, that my nerves would calm down, but the 9:45 seems like Game 7 of the World Series to me. So here we go. I'm sure many of you are aware of the current Bible study here at Emmanuel, which is this book, If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat. My boat is about 6 rows back, right on the aisle there. That's my comfort zone. So we'll give it a try. We all have a story as to why we're at Emmanuel. What's my story? In 2012, I moved up to Williams Bay from the Chicago suburbs. I had worked in the city for 30 years, lived in the suburbs, had a second home up here, decided to move up. I grew up in a very small town in central Illinois, so it fit me very well up here. I really enjoyed the pace of things. At that time, I had been divorced for a few years. My kids were getting older. My youngest was in college. So life was good. I really enjoyed it. But about 18 months into that, I had a gnawing feeling. Something was just still missing in my life. I had grown up in the Methodist church, but truthfully, I had not gone to church in any way other than weddings and funerals for many, many years. I decided that maybe it was time to give church a try. I had been one of those people who would describe himself as spiritual, but not necessarily religious. That was very convenient for me. I could say things such as, how could you not see a newborn infant, a beautiful sunset, mountains, oceans, things like this, and not believe in some higher power. But the reason I say that was convenient is that those statements are fine, but they require no work, no effort, no commitment. So I decided, let's give it a try. Emmanuel was the third church that I visited. And it just so happened that that was the first full Sunday of services in this wonderful building. And I walked in, and I was similarly over there. And it took all of 15 minutes for me to know that I was done looking. This was the church. It was one of those things that just immediately felt right. I began attending services on a regular basis, and I've told this to a million people. The thing that just struck me so much about Emmanuel was the incredible energy, the incredible amount of activities at this church, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All you had to do was look at the church bulletin. There were things going on here every day. And those things didn't just benefit this congregation. They benefited our communities around us and even elsewhere. Eventually, I decided, hey, maybe I should be a little part of this. So the first thing I did was one Sunday, they announced this trip up to the soup kitchen up in Milwaukee. I did that, and since then, I've done it several times. In our trips back and forth in the car, I've gotten a chance to have some great conversations, gotten to know Bob Rosenthal fairly well. And I find out that Bob has been doing this for over 20 years. Outstanding. When we go up to that soup kitchen, the guy that runs the show there is named Casey. He always makes a point to thank Emmanuel for our support all these years. That support is not just serving those meals, it's bags of clothing, toiletries, even some sleeping bags. I think through those trips, I also had a chance to originally meet Judy and Steve Guy. I've gotten to know Judy and Steve. They live close to me in the Bay. And I have to laugh about them. It's, where do you even start? All they've done for this church. I helped Steve out once in a blue moon at the food pantry here in Lake Geneva, where he spends countless hours. Judy helps him there. Their involvement in leadership and side by side here in Lake Geneva, again, tremendous. And finally, I've had the good fortune to volunteer for 3 years at our VIBE program, which is the after-school program for middle school kids. That program has been run the last 2 years by Holly Bromland. Hopefully, many of you got to hear Holly's wonderful message last week about all that goes on here with our youth. You know, we often joke in that program, yes, the kids, at times, they get under our nerves a little bit, but if, like me, you spent many days there, you get to see how much Holly cares for these kids. Once again, outstanding. Now, one of my favorite songs that we occasionally sing here is this song that I found out the title of it is the church song. Not a particularly exciting title, but it's that song that starts out, "We are the church." And the message is that the church is not this building, it's not the bricks and the wood and all that. The church is the people. We are the church. If you believe that message like I do, however, you are forced to also understand that with people, we get the downside. We get imperfection, we get insecurity. If you were here during the transition period from the spring of 2016 through the fall of 2017, unless you were asleep, you know that was an incredibly difficult time for this church. I specifically remember coming here one Sunday, and Pastor Carl, who was filling in, stood over this congregation, put his finger out like this, shook his finger, and said, "This has to stop." I could not believe he said that. It was as if he was a parent scolding a young child. But in difficult times, leadership is crucial. Our leadership then, which was the church council, the search committee, I know what I saw. I saw rock solid. They never, ever blinked. And the messages we heard as we were getting updates were always the same. This is an important decision for this church. We're doing everything we can to make it the right decision. We are looking for leadership that is a good fit for Emmanuel. We ask for your patience. We ask for your prayers. Now, to anyone who was involved in that in any way, no matter how small, I simply say thank you. I think you guys crushed it. I think you hit a grand slam. It's just awesome. I've enjoyed this last 7 months getting a chance to meet Pastor Sarah and Pastor Paul. Their messages just truly inspire me. Pastor Sarah gave a message in March she called, "Come into the Light." I loved it the minute I heard the title. It reminded me of one of my favorite movies, which is The Shawshank Redemption. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's on TV all the time. And in particular, I think of the scene where the main character, Andy Dufresne, has escaped from prison. He has come through that horrible sewer line, and he has come out into that creek. And that scene takes place at night in the middle of a driving thunderstorm. But he is standing there like this. He has come into the light. He has his redemption. Pastor Sarah talked in her message about John 3:16. I believe that's the most quoted verse in the Bible. But she said that verse is not simply a happily ever after verse. That verse is a call to action. Come into the light is a call to action. Why do I like Emmanuel Lutheran Church so much? Because this is a church of action. A few weeks later, it was actually the week after Easter, Pastor Paul spoke, and his message was titled, "Beautiful Scars." His reference, of course, was to Christ's scars from the crucifixion. And he specifically focused on the topic of divorce in that message. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm divorced. As I was sitting there, I thought to myself, he must have interviewed me for this message. It hit me so directly, so personally. I felt like we were in a one-on-one conversation almost. But I was at the 9:45 that day. It was full like this. And as Pastor Paul was finishing that message, you could hear a pin drop in this room. So what did that tell me? It told me, of course, no, it's not about me. It's about we. It's about all of us. We are the church. I have absolute faith in this church going forward. We have revived energy in this church. We have a great story to tell. We need to get our attendance back up to where it was a couple years ago. We can do that. I would urge everyone, please spread the word about the good things, the good news that is going on at Emmanuel. I can't imagine anybody coming here and not liking it. I even had a conversation with Steve Guy after church last week. We were talking back there, and we were specifically talking about someone who had left during the transition. And I said to Steve, well, ask them back. What's wrong with that? We have no downside. Would love to have them back. In closing, the reason I'm here today is, of course, in conjunction with the Imagine Appeal. I think the best thing I can say in that regard, I've already said, this church does not waste. This church uses its resources wisely. This church changes lives for the better. Thank you very much.